Hello everyone, my name is Grayson and welcome to a new game glance of Tamarak Trail. Now, new game glances or NGGs are a video series that I do on new games, underappreciated games, early access games, that kind of thing. This game is not out yet as of the recording of this video. It is planned for a release in 2023, but it is a fantastic game so far. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing, and I'm also seeing a lot of discussion between the testers and the developer. Lots and lots of discussions on the Steam forums and stuff like that. People trying to improve things and really just working together to try to make this game amazing. It's got really good bones and it's got really good art. Let me flick on over to the Steam page and let's take a look at what this game is. All right, so Tamarak Trail, it says it's a deck building roguelike, but that's not actually true. It's actually a dice building roguelite. So there is meta progression. You can get resources that will improve your future run. So it's not a roguelike, it's actually a roguelite. And instead of building a deck of cards, you actually have dice and you will be forging the different sides of the dice to get better. Here's a good example right here. So you can see there's an artifact slotted into this die, and then the 6 sides of the die have been altered from the start of the game to have different effects. It's a really cool game, and when you're in combat, you get to toss the dice out, and sort of they have different effects, whether or not they bump into each other, what sides they land on, and then some of the effects of the dice can have some really interesting combinations. You can take a look here at some of the art style for this game. It's got this sort of whimsical, almost like Alice in Wonderland with a little bit of Tim Burton thrown in there. The enemies are very bizarre sort of mutations on standard forest animals, and you play as, there are 3 characters. There's only really just one available at this time, the detective, but there's like a magician character and another 3rd character I can't remember at this time. The game is developed by Yarrow Games and published by Versus Evil, and this is really quite true. The procedural generation, deck building strategy, these are very, very accurate terms. It's also, like I said, a dice builder. These are fantastic. Look at these. These are terrifying. I can't wait to encounter these. I haven't seen these yet. So let me flick back over to the game and let's watch the intro cinematic because it gives you a really good flavor for the game, the setting, and the art style that we're going to be experiencing as we play. What a beautiful introduction. I absolutely love that video. It really sets the tone for the game very beautifully. It's got these anthropomorphic-ish animals in the forest that are being mutated or aggravated in some way by this strange comet that's landed, and it's awoken all sorts of dangerous things in the forest. And look at the art style, like just this skull and these dice here. This is truly beautiful, beautiful work here. So let's get into the game. Now, I have a development build. You can see down in the corner there. This game is not out at the time that we're talking about it, so do know that I got a copy of this game for free from the developer, but I haven't been paid to make a video or anything like that. So I will give my honest opinions on things, but do keep that in mind that I did get the game for free. This is the lodge. This is your home base. So this is where you're going to have your upgrades, where you're going to start your next to the trail is basically start a game, and then you can select these different heroes. We've got the detective, who's the only one that I have, the magician, and then the tracker. So there's 3 different characters. They cost this sort of meta progression material here called Garmin Bosia. Let's get this out of the way. This is a reference to, I think the show is Twin Peaks. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But this is a food that is eaten by some sort of creatures. I think they're like demons or something. And the food is the physical manifestation of like depression, basically. And the human brain can't comprehend what the true form of this food looks like. So to us, it appears as creamed corn. I have made none of this up. This is true. And so this is hands holding out creamed corn, basically. So this is your meta progression. So it's basically the physical manifestation of like sorrow or something. So that's what Garmin Bosia is. As of this development build, this is incredibly difficult to get. I've only gotten one of this in the 3 runs I've done, and you can see it takes 20 to upgrade the magician, to get the magician. So I won't be getting meta progression in this particular developmental build, but once the game comes out, the community is basically assuming that the progress will be better. So you can see we have stuff here like increasing starting resolve and regeneration. We'll talk about how that works, but you can see there's this different kinds of upgrades here that cost different amounts of this Garmin Bosia stuff. So we're going to need quite a lot of that to get a lot of these upgrades and the other characters, which I'm excited about. So we have our selected character. This is the detective. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit to the trail, and then that's going to take us into the game. And it's going to have a very familiar looking Slay the Spire type of map with branching pathways that lock you out from going back. It's left to right instead of up to down or whatever. By the way, I should mention that this will be in episode 1 where I'm going to talk about the game, but I am going to do some gameplay, but I'm going to go pretty heavily into details about how the game works, what I think about all the different aspects of it and things like that. And then I'll probably continue on and it'll just be mostly just gameplay until I lose. The runs aren't terribly long, especially because I'm quite weak at this stage with no meta upgrades, and I'm still trying things out, so I do lose sometimes quite suddenly. So if you're just interested in the review and a brief bit of gameplay, this is the episode for you. The next episodes will be more of just me playing the game, okay? All right, so once we've got our hero selected, detective, we can hit to the trail. Beautiful art. Look at that. Look at this. It's beautiful. So this map, these nodes, I think, are randomly generated each time. Similar to Slay the Spire, we've got fights, resting, events. There's also treasure. Sometimes you can find shops. And then there's these bosses. As far as I can tell, these bosses do not change, at least not yet. It's possible in a future build they will. So this is always this sort of like boar-looking boss guy. And then there's always, well, actually, this symbol here, and then there's another one over here somewhere. Those symbols I've seen more than once sometimes, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. But there's like really interesting stuff going on this map. I'm really curious to get further on in this game and see what other enemies there are. So let's get started. So really quickly, let's go over the UI. So we've got our health points. We'll talk about this. When you take a hit and there's nothing to block it at all, you take a wound. And when you've lost health to your wounds here, it is permanent. It carries over from node to node, so you do need to think about healing that up. We have gold, which is used at shops to do stuff. Garmin Bosia, which is our meta progression item and can also be used sometimes in events, although I wouldn't recommend it because it's kind of hard to get at this point. We also have time pass, which I think is how many nodes you've gone through. And then we have our resolve and our resolve regeneration. We'll look at that in combat. This button here is your dice forge. So you'll always start off with, that's a new bug. I haven't seen that before. Please excuse that. Let's just close that. So if we take a die, let's take this one here, pop it in there. It expands the die faces out so you can see all 6 of them. So we have here a basic attack. You can see here is the cost. Here's what it's called, and here's what it does. So we have basic attack. It's common. It costs 1 resolve, so that's kind of like your energy, and it deals 5 damage. So pretty basic. This is a very basic attack. We have here a defend. This costs 0 of our energy resource, and it gains us 6 defense. So this is a really good way to block some damage. We have here Jagged Bolt. This is common and costs 1. This applies 3 bleed per, and then there's sort of like an explodey symbol. This is explained in the tutorial, which is pretty good. This means that each time this die has been bonked into by another die, it will get added effects. So these dice don't do anything if they've been struck by other dice. This one does, and we'll show that when we get into combat. So we pack that die back up, pop it back over here, and put the other one in. There's also an artifact slot here, but we don't have any, or it's called cores, but we don't have any yet. So this die has 2 defends, a backflip, which gain 1 dodge, flip to the other side, and exhaust, and then we'll sort of talk about that in a second as well, and then some basic attacks. So what I'm going to do here, real quick, is I'm going to take this defend off of here, pop it into this slot here, because I don't want to roll 2 defends. So if I have no defends on this die, there's never a chance I'll roll 2 defends in one turn. I don't want that to happen. I want this to be purely offense and this to be more like support and defense. You'll see. Now let's go back really briefly and talk about this flipping. There are lots of dice in this game, lots of dice faces and powers that will cause dice to flip to another side, and this is crucial for some builds. When you hover a die that does this, a face, it will show an arrow and then highlight the face that it's going to flip to. So for instance, if I hover this backflip, it shows very clearly that it's going to flip to this side. So what will happen is if I gain 1 dodge, flip to the other side, that means I can then play this face of the die as well. So if I get a dodge, flip, I can do 5 damage and then still do what's on this other die over here. So this is kind of like having an extra roll. Essentially, you've got an extra die ability to use. You can also chain flipping effects so that they'll flip, like let's say this flips to this, and then this one flips to this, and then this one flips to this, and you can get kind of a big combo going. The downside is that you have to be able to pay for all of these different faces. And your energy that you spend, your resolve, is also a shield to block your health. So you've got this give and take where you're trying to do as much as you can to defeat your enemies, but the more of your resources you're spending, the closer you might be to taking damage. So you got to be careful with that. This will make a lot more sense when we get into combat. So let's get in. Let's back out of that screen here, and then let's go to our first node. It's just going to be a combat. I think it's always the pigeon. Yep, the pigeon is my favorite, by the way. Look at him. Look at this little guy. Isn't he amazing? He's got a gun. It's a pigeon with gun. So let's talk about our block here really quickly, and then that'll make the enemies make sense as well. So we have 25 resolve. Resolve will take damage before we take a wound. So if this guy does 4 damage to us, we'll go down to 21 resolve. We actually heal 7 resolve every turn. So we have this pool of max resolve plus turn by turn we regenerate this much, and we have that to spend on 2 things: dice faces and taking damage from enemies. If you would ever take damage that would reduce you beyond 0 resolve, you will take exactly 1 health damage. So let's say that I had 1 resolve and this guy was going to hit me for 50 damage. I would lose my 1 resolve, and then the rest of that 49 damage would become 1 wound, right? So if you take a really, really big hit that you can't block, you're only going to lose 1 hit. The problem comes is when enemies might be doing, say, 2 times 4 damage in a turn and you don't have enough resolve. You could take 2 wounds in a turn, so you have to be very careful about that. We also have our armor here, which blocks damage before resolve is hit. And then we also have, of course, 5 wounds. If we ever lose our 5th one, we die instantly, run over. So this is our detective character. He's pretty cool. He's got this cool looking cloak that he explores with. He's got his crossbow for his attacks. And then here are our dice. We also have an auto roll, so we can use this if we want our dice to roll automatically. I don't do that because I like to control when the dice bump into each other for those extra effects. We have 3 rerolls for the whole run. So do not click this button unless it's an emergency, because these don't come back unless you get an event or something that gives you one. And we also have a once per battle power to instantly get 5 resolve. That's very important. It will save your bacon more than once, because sometimes 5 resolve is all you need to win a fight or not die. We can also end turn early if we ever want to, not do anything. So then now let's look at the enemies. So the enemy here is going to telegraph their move, like in a lot of these kinds of roguelite kind of games like Slay the Spire. They'll tell you what they're doing most of the time so you can plan for it. Down here is their armor, their resolve, and their resolve regeneration. This is typically going to be pretty low compared to yours because you're the hero of the story. And also, spoiler alert, there's not going to be a single pigeon. They have these 2 wounds, and they have these like corrupted looking hearts. Like we have these like healthy, vibrant looking ones, and they have these like tumorous looking ones. So let's get started. So how do we play? So what we want to do is remember that I had that one face. So I can right click it here to see what's on the faces of the die. So remember that I have this one ability that applies bleed stacks per dice bonk. That means I want to roll this one first, because if it lands on this face, I want to ram my other die into that one to get that effect. So that's how I build this character when I'm playing, is I always make sure there's one die with all of the bonk effects on it. And then if I roll one of those sides up, I will bonk the other die into it. If that makes sense. I said the word bonk and die like 50 times in that sentence. So let's get rid of that. So we're going to pick it up with left click. It's just going to kind of roll around and hover over the different sides. And you can just sort of like, just like that, just like chuck it. Now, what you want to do is, I didn't explain the downside of bonking. When 2 dice, there's an official word for it. I'm going to call it bonking because I can't remember. When 2 dice bonk into each other, it increases the cost of each of those dice, the face cost. So this attack right here costs 1. If I bonk into it, it'll cost 2. So because this didn't show up with this face that wants to be bonked, there is no reason for me to hit it with the other die. And in fact, I should not, because it will cost me more resolve to do the same thing. So I'm going to grab this die and I'm just going to kind of throw it over here so it doesn't hit this one. I will say this is one downside I've seen with the game. It is kind of predictable what faces are going to show up, because if you roll the die gently enough, you can kind of just control that it lands on that side that's up. So hopefully that gets changed. I think if this was a bigger part of the board, it would be a little easier and you had to like get more of a energy into the throw, but oh well. So this is going to give me a dodge. So if you pick it up, drop it up here to play it. So you can see it gave me the dodge. Avoid damage from 1 attack, and then this will go away, and it cost me some resolve. And then remember that it flips to the other side and exhausts. So what does that mean? That means that now I can cast this basic attack as well. I do have to cast it up here. Bam. So 5 damage. And then this gets flocking. Another creature spawns at 3 stacks. So you can see damaging this guy makes him start to spawn another critter. And then this one should exhaust. So flip to the other side and exhaust. Does nothing while exhausted. Play to refresh. So this die face now, you see this like tuckered out swan here? That's the exhausted symbol. So if I roll the die and it comes up with this symbol, it does nothing. I have to play it and get nothing out of it, but then it will make this ability useful again. Exhaust is a way for them to balance more powerful abilities into not being able to be used every turn. So we have one more attack, so let's play that. Bam. And then we end turn. So he shoots me with his gun. How this pigeon got a rifle, I don't know. So you can see he did a little bit of damage to our resolve, but then we got 7 resolve back, and we also, well, actually we dodged it because we had that dodge effect. So now he's going to hit us twice for 4 damage, so a little bit more sort of dangerous. So let's roll this one first. Aha, here we go. So we got the bleed face. So what we want to do is sort of gently bonk this die into this one when we roll it. And the reason I say gently is you can hit this die so hard that it flips over onto a different face, and then you don't have the right face up that you wanted for the bonking anymore, and now you just have to pay more to cast your dice and no effect, right? So you want to like gently just sort of like, there we go. So I got the exhausted face. You can see what I mean about it showing up with the same face you started with a lot. So this will cost me 4 energy and will unexhaust. Actually, it was 3 for some reason, even though it said 4. Not sure about that. So this face now has a, let's see, it should show 3 bleed per bonk stack. So if we put this on this guy, he'll get 3 bleed, and then at the start of his turn, he will regenerate 2 resolve, then take the bleed, and then they both use their abilities. So now you can see we're in a bit of trouble. We've got a second bird here, and we haven't gotten this one down low enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this one to finish it off because they're going to just keep shooting me. And we're also going to use this ability once per battle. So now we've got 5 more resolve, which helps block our health. Let's throw that. We've got a basic damage. So remember, any damage past the resolve will take off 1 wound. So if we cast this here like this, he lost 1 of his health, but no more. And next turn he'll regenerate 2, then take 2. So he won't take a damage. So hopefully we roll another basic attack here. We didn't. We rolled defense. This is fine because this is going to block. So this is going to cost me 0 resolve, which is also a shield, and give me 6 defense. So I'm going to block a lot of this damage now. So here's another thing I haven't discussed. They all have this buff called Wild Heart. This increases their damage dealt by their missing health. So when you've damaged a unit, you can see this guy is now actually doing 1 point more of damage because he's missing a health. So they get kind of like enraged by taking damage, sort of incentivizes you to kill off 1 unit rather than work on multiple at once. I think most enemies have this Wild Heart ability, so you do have to watch out for that. Okay, so we got the bleed. I'm going to just gently bonk into it. Sometimes that happens. Let's just play the defense, play the bleed. So now what's going to happen is, there, so that one died off. The death animations are amazing, how they just turn into bones and then they just sort of melt away and this like black fire almost takes them. It's really quite cool. So we've got this one enemy left here. So this should be pretty easy now that we don't have 2 to fight. So let's just roll that one. We've got 2 attacks, that's good. We have to be careful getting a little low on resolve because we're spending it as well as being damaged. Got a bleed. Let's just bonk into that. There's a bleed. There's a defense. It's getting close. There's another bleed. The bleed stacks are really good if you get a lot of them because it does that much damage. And then next turn it goes down 1. So if you've got a really high amount of bleed, they're going to die with enough time. So this is probably a lethal amount of bleed here, just because he only regenerates 2. So all we have to do now is just survive. But we'll go ahead and hit him once here. This means he'll die at the start of his turn. Easy peasy. So now here's one of the best parts about the game is, like any roguelite deck builder, dice builder, whatever, we get to build our deck, or our dice in this case. So we got 45 gold. This will be useful later. And we also get these different die faces. So let's take a look at them. They have rarities. So this is common, common, rare. So let's look at this one first. Smoke Bomb costs 1. Deal 2 damage and apply 4 blind. Damage done is reduced by 25%. So this is a small amount of damage that also debuffs their damage output. So that's pretty useful. Here's just one more thing. Deal 2 damage, flip the die to the left. This is quite fun as well if you're building a die around it, using an ability, flipping, trying to get as many uses as possible. The downside to this strategy is it costs a lot. See, this still costs 1 resolve to cast, and it's only doing 2 damage. You're flipping to another side, casting that side, there's more resolve, so you got to be really careful with that. And then we have this rare one, Scent of Blood. Deal additional damage equal to bleed stacks on the target, and then exhaust. This costs a lot. That would be really fun to do if we got enough bleed. So I think I'm going to take this one and not put it on a die yet because it's not going to really do much for us. It costs way too much to be useful at this point. So let's take that. What you can do is go in here at any time in between events and just pop a dice open, and then you could just freely just replace dice faces in there anytime you want. You can also, if for whatever reason, have a die that has a bunch of blank sides on it if you want to. If you don't want to have to pay for stuff that's on your dice. However, you don't have to ever cast dice if you roll them in combat. You can just end your turn early with the button down in the bottom right. So we'll leave that ability in there for now and just hope that we get some more bleed things. We should be able to get those because we have 3 choices per fight. So everyone, that is a quick rundown of Tamarak Trail and how the gameplay works. Let me briefly talk about my thoughts on the gameplay and the art and the music and all that stuff. As you can see, the graphics are quite interesting and, in my opinion, quite unique. They're very colorful and ominous at the same time. It's got a very dangerous mysticism to it, and I really love that. And I love little touches like when you hover over a node and it sort of pops out like that and glows. That is wonderful. I love that. Look at this. That is beautiful. I love the way that these are animated like that, especially this one here. That one is beautiful. I love that. It makes it just so much more interactive. The birds flying by, the clouds and stuff. It makes the map a much more interesting place to be other than just selecting your next destination and just moving on. I love the dice system. I have a board game called Dice Forge, and it is a wonderful game. We love playing it, and so this is just kind of like that in video game form. Plus, it lets you do some other video gamey things like automating certain systems and stuff. The resources are fine. They're not anything crazy. This is the meta resource. This is the in-run resource. So nothing crazy there. There are some events, but I've found a sort of sameness to them at this point in development. The game hasn't even released, though, so just keep that in mind. For this character, at least, there seem to be basically 3 main strategies. Big damage, flipping dice all over the place to get combos, and bleed. And that's cool. I think it's awesome that there's multiple ways to build this character, and I'm really excited to see what other characters like the Magician have to offer. It makes me really, really want to get these meta resources so I can start upgrading. The bosses are very fun. They're a little bit kind of a spectacle. This one is not very challenging in my opinion. This one is a lot more challenging once you get to that one. One of my biggest criticisms of this game at this point is the physics of the dice rolling. Something just feels a little bit off, especially as you're tossing the dice and they're sort of not really rolling too much. I don't know how exactly you would fix that. Yeah, I often end up grabbing a die, throwing it, and it's just doesn't even roll, it just stays on that same face. And maybe that's part of the strategy, but it doesn't feel like I'm rolling dice, if you know what I mean. The sort of randomness to a deck builder or a dice builder can come from the way you build your dice and manage your statistics of drawing certain things. But in this game, I'm having a little bit of trouble not rolling the thing on the top sometimes, if that makes sense. But I think this game has huge potential. It's extremely fun. I love the music and the graphics, and I really want to show you guys some more combat and building my dice and enemies and stuff like that. So I will continue gameplay in the next episode. So if you're just here for my thoughts on the game and sort of an introduction, this is the one for you. If you want to keep watching, please do so. I will have these episodes coming out until I lose. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little NGG of Tamarak Trail, which is a fantastic game coming out here soon, hopefully. So thank you again for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more things like this. I do a lot of strategy gaming. I do a lot of Let's Plays, and I'm really into Age of Wonders 4 right now. So if you want to see some of that, come check it out. So thanks again for watching. Check out Tamarak Trail on Steam, and I will see you in my next video.